As his assistant told me, fish that swims, not things in the shell. Like
Right. No turtle.
Don't eat a turtle.
People eat turtle soup.
I'm joking.
It's gross.
I'm joking. You
No one
said
does
shells.
that.
It's very
I
cool.
got my Metallica t-shirt on today. We're ready to go.
Are we recording?
Yeah, we've been
Nice.
recording.
I love it.
Of course.
I like it when Ben pulls a sneak attack and just.
Oh, that's
bam.
great. I'm talking about turtles and
And
Judaism.
eating them.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Now,
That's a
would
good
that-
start.
Would a turtle?
No, that's
Judaism and turtles?
Would a
not a good start.
No, it's a bad
turtle
start.
be kosher?
I don't know.
That's outside of your realm.
That's outside of my
ishness.
ishness. Yeah.
It's always so far. We only know so much.
That's right. Would you like?
My
to
son
introduce-
went to a Jewish day
Oh.
school from kindergarten to 8th grade, and he left there knowing more than I ever knew.
Oh, there you go. That's the
Excellent.
key. What, you want me to introduce our guest?
I
or
wanted
what?
you to introduce our guest.
Oh, why don't you do it then?
No, because you've known him longer.
Oh,
It's your good friend.
okay. Well, we have our good friend. Brian Unell is here in the house in Detroit. Flew in. 30, what did we say, 30 months in the making?
30 months in the making. March of 2020 was this. I had a flight up here to do this with you guys.
Well, it was probably snowing then, just like it's snowing now.
Son of a... I can't believe it. It's like October. There's a little snowflakes. It won't stay. It's supposed to be 75 this weekend, but yes, it is not great. Brian didn't bring a coat.
I've got a nice warm sweater
A
on.
little
I'm
sweater
good.
on. He looks...
And
you know,
he's dressed for travel in the classic sense. Like
Is-
you think when air travel was glamorous, that is how Brian prepared himself for our day.
I'm very
and I
comfortable.
appreciate
Her
that.
travel was glamorous when they had like meals for everyone,
People were smoking
smoking.
cocktail
When
service.
you watched, what was the Queen's Gambit? Remember they were traveling and there'd be drinks and smoking. Oh, can you imagine flying and smoking? I don't think I
did
ever
once.
flew. I don't think I ever flew when I was smoking.
I did once. I flew to the Bahamas with my dad in 1987, and he was a smoker, and he smoked next to me on a plane. And I think that's the only time I have any recollection of
You did that today, you'd be arrested for child
smoking on a
abuse.
plane. I know. While I was 17, does that make me still a child? I mean, it was his child, but
Not back then.
back then
No one cared.
she looks like a grown person.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's fine.
She's fine. She's fine. Yeah, that's good. Well, Brian, welcome to the show.
Glad to be
Have
here.
you never been on? I don't think you have.
I have
I
not.
can't believe this. I'm trying to think how Brian. Oh, I do
I know
how.
I know how we know each other.
So, there's two things I know of that I think we got introduced. Ed through Ed Lovern was
Yep.
one.
He's
my
now
good
the
friend.
CEO
I hope he's listening to this.
at Ascension St. Agnes in Baltimore.
That's now yes, right. And Ed and I worked together at Borges right off the bat, right out of grad school. I was intern with Ed.
Was that when you were in
Kalamazoo.
charge of surgery?
No, not yet. That was before then. No one should say I was in charge of surgery
don't
because that
know.
wasn't true. And Lord knows that would be bad.
Yes.
So, but then, remember we sent those, the very first, before our very first leaders forum, we had this idea of creating the black, like,
The big
envelopes with like this really cool
Elaborate,
invitation,
yes.
and we sent those out to people. And I thought this would be great. The only person to respond, which was a big encouragement for me, was Brian actually called me out of the blue from that letter and said, "This is a great thing. I love it. I love what you're doing." And I was like, otherwise we were getting
was
those
like
things
crickets
in the mail
in return.
6 months later.
Yes.
That were returned.
crickets.
Shows you how much I know.
Well, it's still going strong.
Still going strong. Who would have thought?
Rolling into it very soon here.
But I think we met through that, and then I think we just kind of kept in touch, right?
Yeah, we have over the years, and you've been a good friend.
Well,
No
awesome.
pun intended.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You know, it's such a small world. I ran into Ed in an elevator in Nashville a couple weeks ago. I was getting in an elevator, and he was in the elevator.
What?
Yeah.
That is so random. That's
So,
great.
yeah.
What a great guy. I love that guy.
He is a
I
great
was saying,
guy.
did you talk to him on the elevator?
Yeah, we got off actually and caught up, and
Oh, that's good. He's like, well, I'll see you.
yeah, no, it was great to reconnect. I mean, I worked with Ed for over 4 years. I mean,
Wow.
he taught me so much.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a young Brian and a young Ben working for the same fella. Well, what happened next, Brian?
No, this was
That was-
recent.
that was-
Oh,
this
that
is
was
probably
recent.
like just recently.
Oh,
It was a long time ago I worked for Ed.
Yeah. Yeah, you worked for Ed before he came to Piedmont, and then I worked for him at Piedmont. I didn't technically work for him, but I worked for him.
I was in grad school, did an internship in between my first and second year.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I worked for Ed directly.
I went around and did transformation stuff for Ed in all the corporate areas at Piedmont, which led to our business case for Epic.
Oh.
And we had to figure out a way to get ready for meaningful use in ICD-10. He was over IT at the time. I had IT reporting to him.
Was Tim Stack there still?
Yeah. Tim was great.
Timmy. He's
One of the most
CEO at Borges.
inspirational.
That's my first mentor out of school. He's since passed.
Yeah, he passed away in 2013, I believe, 2012, 2013.
I ran into Tim in that same year, probably a month before he found out that he had cancer, which was crazy.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen him in 10 years.
He went on vacation, had some internal pains, came back, opened him up, closed him up, and...
Stage 4.
Yeah,
I think he was gone like 2 months, a month later.
It was a couple months, yeah. I mean, it was...
I mean, isn't that honestly the way you want it? I don't mean to be dark, but do you really want to like suffer with cancer for a long time, or do you want to like have cancer and like live it, you know?
But he was
wrap
like
it up?
50, I think, or 55.
Yeah, he had a young kid. I mean, it's...
He had one of those weird
Heartbreaking.
things where he was like, his kids were, I knew him when his kids were like old, and then he like
Had a bonus baby.
had a bonus baby, but it was like 15, 16-year gap. It was a huge
Wow.
gap. Huge. But all right, let's go. Let's talk about Brian though. So Brian wrote a book. I don't want to talk about it yet, but like you just wrote a book, which is amazing.
Yeah, that was, speaking of time in the making, that was 10 years in the making. I've been keeping notes in my phone for 10 years with threatening my wife that I was going to write a book. The original title of my book was called Common Sense Ain't So Common. Just about all the different things that I observed in the life. Like, you know, when you're walking down the aisle in a sporting event, for example, and people are walking on the left side instead of the right side, I don't understand. You know, so,
Yeah, exactly.
So I had
agree.
like...
So you had some of those.
I had all kinds of stuff in there just about, and then some of it was around leadership, and then it became around parenting, et cetera. But, you know, life got in the way. As we were just talking about the Epic, I ended up doing a business case for Epic, became one of the accountable executives for that, ended up transforming some revenue cycle stuff, and health system grew. And next thing you know, the time got away, right?
Right.
And pandemic hits, and I find myself with some time after I quit my job in February 7th of 2020.
Yeah, this is great.
Yes.
He quits his job
It was
February 7th.
Yeah, it was 2 years in the making, essentially.
Like a month later, he was like, crap.
Yeah, I was crap. I mean, I turned down a job at the end of February to be CFO of a private equity-backed physical therapy group. They wanted me to relocate to Baltimore. My son was in 6th grade, and I said, I just can't move him. I said, I'll commute, I'll do whatever. It was a perfect job in every way, just the location. People were great, really enjoyed it, everything. And so I turned it down because I had a ton of other stuff. I was looking at 19 other things, literally, that I was looking at.
Wow.
And they all dried up within a couple months after the pandemic hit. So I exported my notes out of my phone. It was 32 pages into a Word document, 10 years, you know. Some of the same ideas, good or bad, were in there multiple times. And I hired a guy who my parents knew his parents. My dad built him a house years before, his parents' house, and he's 7 years younger than me, so we didn't ever go to school together, but knew of the name. He's calls himself a book architect. And he's essentially a coach, and he does ghostwriting as well, which I thought I was going to need a lot of help with. And he just became a book coach. And so he said, just start writing. So 1 chapter, 2 chapters, ended up with 50 chapters, 100,000 words. And
See, I couldn't do that. I remember when I started one when I left.
There's an outline, I
Celtics.
think, somewhere living.
I had an outline of I was going to do Rev Cycle for Dummies, like a version of that for CFOs. But which you laugh, but it's so true, right? Like most CFOs actually don't know how Rev Cycle works or what to do.
Most C-suite folks don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. So I thought if I write a book for C-suite, I actually think that would be really good. Now it wouldn't sell 1 million copies, but it'd be fun. I wrote, and I remember writing I'm gonna do this. I wrote the outline. Tina helped me with the outline,
Yes.
but of course. And then I was like, I'm gonna start. And I wrote, and I was like, oh, this is really good. And I was like, whew, that took a lot of work. And I looked, and I had like a page and a half, something ridiculous where it was
You're like, it's a blog.
okay, I don't think I can do this.
Send me the outline. We'll take it from there.
Yes,
does
Brian
take
can take it.
Yeah, it does take some discipline. I think when you listen to people who write, and even it's something that I do now, is I put time in my calendar that says to write, right? And I actually sit down and use that time and kind of treat it like anything, like routine, like washing your face or
Yeah, but just
whatever.
for me, I guess it felt just super overwhelming of like, I got all these, like probably like you did, right? I have all these ideas in my head. And then it starts like, I'm on a rabbit hole here. So like, as I'm even writing, I'm like, rabbit hole, it's like,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just had pages and pages, and I had a file called Cutting Room Floor of just stuff that I started writing and never really finished.
Yeah.
yeah,
Then
right.
and I'm going to pick some of it back up. But I mean, I thought, book is a 4-letter word for a reason. I mean, it is the ultimate 4-letter word.
You were like, book.
And you don't realize all the different parts that you have to do besides writing. I mean, I thought that was going to be the hard part. I only applied to undergraduate schools that didn't require essays. I have an undergrad degree in statistics. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I mean, I'm not a writer. I avoided it.
Well, you are now, mister.
I am now.
Yeah.
So
I see it right here. Like your name's on the side,
I know.
right?
It's hard to believe.
Unell.
When people send me pictures of them holding the book from the pre-orders, it's the coolest thing in the world to me. Coolest thing in the world. So, and the feedback I've gotten has been great. So I'm really excited about it. And I don't know when this podcast is going to be launched, but the book will be out by then.
It's out now, isn't it?
Well, I've been selling
ebook
them.
is out.
I've been
the
selling,
ebook.
yeah.
And there were
Okay.
pre-sales.
Oh, I have the we'll get it out then.
Yeah.
My favorite part was, okay, can I just say what my favorite part was?
Sure.
You should say the title of the book.
Oh, sorry. I'm terrible at this.
I
Clearly,
know,
Brian hasn't paid for this.
We don't ever do product.
I just want to say Brian's never paid us a dime. This is everyday leadership. You will make a difference, which if you know Brian is like classic Brian. 2 parts. One is I have to be honest. I told Tina, I was like, I have been putting off reading it because I'm like, what if it's not good?
Yeah,
Right?
of course.
Then you're like, because I love
What am I going to
Brian.
do about it?
What if it's not good? But it is very good. I like it. And my daughter was like, well, what'd you think? I was like, well, it's hard because I know Brian, and I've had this before with a couple of people that we know, and it's like, so I can just hear him talking, and so it's not like reading a book objectively.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to know. Like, I think I like it, but I'm also like, there's parts where you're just like, this is Brian. I don't know. It's like now encapsulated into a book
Right.
form. So
It's genuine
so when
Brian.
you do the audiobook, which he's recording today and tomorrow with our friend Rome, it'll feel like already in my head what it feels like, right? But actually, my favorite part was the story about your son and ballroom dancing. Which I think is still hilarious because it's so classic of an example of people take one thing and then they don't realize. And it's such a great story. Yes. So I don't know if you want to tell the story or if it's going to ruin the book. But
no.
Tell us the story.
I mean, one of the most interesting parts about it is 6 months before the event actually happened with the ballroom dancing story, I was actually in the process of transforming the revenue cycle at Piedmont. And we were bringing together the different parts of the organization, 4 different business units, 7 different departments within it. I mean, it was, everybody was getting a new boss. Everybody was getting a new job description. And I basically got to the point where we were kicking this thing off and the new structure was there, and had a meeting with all my direct reports and all of their direct reports. And basically, the top of the meeting was I went through what I called Brian's ways of working at the time. And the number one item on that list was, at the top was communications and expectations is 90% of success. Because if you can't communicate effectively, and you could do the best thing in the world, but if somebody has different expectations, it's seen as a failure.
Right.
So 6 months later, my son is starting first grade, and my wife is working at the time, and we needed after-school activities for him. And the list of after-school activities from the school came home, and on Mondays there was ballroom dancing. And so he said he wanted to do it, and my wife and I were looking at each other at the dinner table with him sitting in between us thinking, this probably is not a good idea. I mean, just not a good idea for him to do ballroom dancing. But he thought that's what he wanted to do. And we're like, well, the form's not due for a week. We'll figure it out, right? So a week goes by and we're at the dinner table again, and we still don't have anything for him to do on Monday afternoons after school. And he says he wants to do it. And so my wife and I talk about it afterwards. It's only 10 sessions, 10 weeks. we can get through this, right? And the reason I didn't think he was like it is because he loves sports. He's a big sports kid, still is today, and just wasn't thinking that he was going to enjoy this. So he signs up, goes the first week, comes home from school. We're sitting at the dinner table. How was school? School's great. How was ballroom dancing? It was okay. And again, you're talking to a first grader.
Right.
You're not.
My 13-year-old was the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not like it's much different, but yes.
Right.
You get asked and answered,
You don't
right?
get much.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Until they're ready to talk it. Like
Right.
now my son comes in at 10:30 at night when he's ready to go to bed and he's ready to tell me about his
Totally.
entire
Anything.
Yes.
like the entire week.
Everything. Yeah.
It's the craziest thing.
That's so true.
It's like we had time in the car earlier.
we
we
had
had time
all
at
day.
dinner.
Why are
Like,
you here now?
Right.
That's exactly like our house
So-
right now. We had two
Well, and
teenage
I think
girls.
too, and don't you think at that point at night you immediately think something is wrong, right? Like, why are you talking to me now? Like,
Oh, they just don't want to go to bed.
Yeah.
My kids, I swear to God, they're up. We come down. I swear it's like a dorm room. Like it's like a frat house. Like what happened in the middle of the night? Why is there shit?
I hope it's not. I
everywhere?
hope it's not a frat house with two daughters.
that's right.
Oh, it's basically. I'm imagining a sorority house is similar, but I don't
Right.
know.
Between the girls and the cats, it's all
Oh Lord, don't even.
cattywampus.
I always hear like if I'm up in the middle of the night, I'll hear like, "What is going on down there?" But it's half the time it's our cats, just like I don't know what they're doing. Anyways, keep going.
Anyway, so he goes to ballroom dancing. It was okay. So asked and answered, right, as we discussed. Next week, he comes back. Second week, we're at the dinner table again. How's school? School's great. How's ballroom dancing? He goes, half of the boys quit. So we are now in a situation
Right.
where we thought we were
Not a
going to be in.
surprise.
Right.
Okay.
And basically explaining to him, look, you committed to this. We finish things we commit in this family. He's extremely analytical even at that age. And so we explained to him, look, you're 20% of the way done. You only have 4 times as much as you've already done left, and you can make this happen. We placated him enough, and he realized that we weren't going to let him quit because that's just not what we do in the family. And, the girls are counting on you. The teachers are counting on you. You got to finish this thing. So he reluctantly goes back for week 3, or maybe placated enough to go back for week 3. And he comes home, and we're sitting at the dinner table again. How was school? School's great. How was ballroom dancing? And he's just silent. And you could look in his eyes, and you could see him just working, right? Just working it through, trying to figure out. And so a few, probably 30 seconds later, he just goes, it's not what I was expecting. And so I look at my wife, I look at him, he looks at my wife, he looks at me, and natural question is, well, what were you expecting?
What did you think it was going to be?
And for those of you who remember the cartoon Inspector Gadget, he had like the ability to like stretch out his arms.
Yeah.
Well, Harris stretched out his arms to like, it seemed like the ends of the rooms, and goes, a big room with a bunch of balls where I could dance. And
Which every 7-year-old
Yeah.
just
Which
loves.
perfectly
6
makes
year-
sense.
yeah.
I mean,
right,
Yeah.
he's a 6-year-old.
right.
And at the moment, I felt like the absolute worst parent on the planet.
You never asked. You never said, "Hey, this is what ballroom dancing looks like."
Right. I knew he
Right.
didn't know what it
Should we
was.
watch a video.
Right. Like,
It's called Dancing with the Stars.
right. He'd
Right.
never seen Dancing with the Stars.
Right.
He'd never seen any of that. He thought he was going to go to like a bar mitzvah party
And,
or
like-
like a DJ or a ball
Ball
pit.
pit.
Sure.
Ball pit.
Yeah,
First
right.
thing.
Ball pit.
Right.
I think, yeah.
And he would be there dancing and, with the
Yeah,
balls and,
jamming it out.
Bunch of
and
balls.
getting out all of his energy that he would typically have after school.
Like
Get it out.
dodgeball.
Exactly. And-
Dodgeball and dancing. That's what it meant. That's what
And
a
that-
boy would think. Yes, of course.
And it's like, there goes the Parent of the Year award this year, right? I mean, you just completely botched this one.
I do think, though, that this brought up another point my wife and I have been talking a lot about. Of just as a parent, one of the things you hold yourself probably accountable for is that you should have predicted, you should have anticipated X,
right.
and that is actually the biggest. I think the biggest problem with like that parents usually hold themselves guilty for is that we should have anticipated the X.
Right. I should have known that you
I should have known
thought,
that you
right.
thought that
'Cause
way,
I should
or
know
I should
you
known
better.
or I should have predicted that like this was going to happen based on X. I feel like that's the area where Jenny and I have tried to give ourselves a lot of grace on, because that's not true necessarily. Like it's not.
It was
true.
true in this case, but yes.
No, it's not. You wouldn't have
it's not.
thought. I wouldn't have thought it either.
But no, it just didn't. My
wouldn't have
wife,
clicked. It
my
wouldn't
wife
have
and I
clicked.
knew that this was going to be a disaster, but we just didn't connect the dots.
We didn't
for
know
him.
how.
But
it
the
was
thing
gonna
is,
be a disaster, maybe.
but it happens every day.
Right.
It happens every day in work. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times there's
constantly.
situations where people will be doing something and they think they're doing the best bang up job in the world, and they get to bring it forward or complete some task, and it's like, so you did what? Like,
Sure.
it's unbelievable.
Well, and you have people, I don't know if you've ever heard the thing. Remember, we talked about this would be like people who are my rules for me, my rules for you, my rules for me, your rules for me, and there's like one other one, right? I can't remember what it. There's 3 different kinds of people, and when you come across someone who's like my rules for me and my rules for you, it's super important that you lay out what the expectation is.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, then you have a situation where that person's already putting their rules or expectations on you of what they would expect. Like an Enneagram 1 would do this often. If you're familiar with the Enneagram.
I'm slightly familiar with it just from you going through Enneagram 7, I know, but so I studied that enough so I could interact with you effectively.
There we
I
go.
forget
Yeah,
all
interact
of
with
the
me
time.
effectively. That's right.
I forget all the time which one I am. I refuse to be labeled. It's probably an
'cause
Enneagram type.
That is. You're a 4, I think, or 6.
But I'll tell you, that story actually, as the health system grew, I went, every time we added a new health system, we took on new employees from the revenue cycle, and we were essentially bringing them into the corporate structure, for lack of a better phrase, in the shared services environment. When I go meet with a team for the first time, I would actually take the story, and that's how I would start off my meeting with them.
Right.
And basically in saying at the end of it, look, we're going to go through a bunch of stuff today. We're probably going to leave here with more questions than you have answers. I can't answer them all, but we're going to work together. And I don't expect you to trust me today, but I expect you to give me a chance to earn your trust. And that's all you can expect from people in a situation when the people are going through change like that. And
How does your son remember the ballroom dancing now that he's older?
he remembers it the same. I mean,
Like, does he remember in like a fond way of like, oh yeah, that was funny? Or was it like, I'm just curious, what was his reaction to it today?
what's interesting is we have a video of the recital that I had taken on a little flip camera that we had at the time, and then that I also show when I go to this.
You show the video
Of him at the recital, yeah. And
He's mortified from that.
No,
That's unbelievable.
yeah,
You got to show it his graduation.
yeah, he
Keep it forever.
Keep it forever.
yeah. Well, he read, and just so you know, Harris read the book. I was not going to publish the book without him knowing
okay,
the
so
stories.
he
He's
approved.
in there a couple times of different stories that I've, where I felt like I could have done a better job or learned as a parent, or maybe not, as you said, predicted it, but just the things that and how that translates into life. But no, he remembers it. They asked him at the end if he would do the next semester or whatever, and he was no.
If you're going to bring some balls to the ballroom, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
maybe.
Could we?
So,
Can we talk about dodgeball?
How did he
on
do,
this?
by the way? I've seen the video. But he remembers I did that thing and my parents made me and it's over now.
Yep.
yeah.
Life lesson.
That's
Life's
right.
life's about choices.
That's right. You made that
And
choice,
you made
buddy.
That choice. You signed
Sorry.
up for it.
Choices and chances, right?
So what do you in these kind of situations, like what would you recommend? Let's teach the audience something.
Wait, what? What are we
Like in the situation where like you have a different interpretation of ballroom dancing than your son, right?
Oh,
Those words.
I
So
think
do you say like, this is what I mean by X? What do you hear? That's a typical exchange too, where you like lay out, then you make the person repeat back. Like I do that often. I'll say, I heard you tell me this. Is this what you want me to do? Right? You repeat back.
I'll just translate it to the world of business, right? And this is our revenue cycle generated audience for the most part, I would say, right? Maybe.
Yeah, whatever.
So, and for those of you who know me, I call it revenue psycho because I think it's crazy. And and in the revenue psycho world, right, there's vendors everywhere. And when you're putting together contracts, you can write the best contract in the world, but you can't ever get to the level of details as it relates to process and policies, and unless you're doing some sort of full outsourcing arrangement. And even then, you don't get to it, right?
No, it's tough.
And so you've got to get down into details with people. You've got to understand. I mean, if you say bi-weekly, are you meaning twice a week? Or are you meaning every other week? Right?
A fortnight.
When you talk about
our Indian friends use that.
there's
British.
there's another story in the book about using subjective terms. I mean, subjective terms are the death of business.
Yes, that was one of my other favorite parts.
I mean, people use the term, "Oh, we're going to do this frequently." Well, frequently to you and frequently to me are completely different, right?
That was a good one. I liked it where you were mediating something and they were leaving and you're like, well, this is good. We did this. And like, we're going to meet frequently.
Yeah.
Well, what's that mean? Well, monthly. Then they were like quarterly.
Right. I mean, literally at the same time,
Right.
people saying completely different things.
Oh,
As they were
okay.
walking out the door, thought that they both had a good meeting. And so you
And
just
they would have left there disappointed because they'd have been later. They'd have been like, well, I thought we were going to meet frequently.
Yeah.
We never meet with these guys.
right. And it's just
In what world is quarterly frequently? But then again, it's a good question. To
If you're
ask.
never meeting,
If you're never right, I suppose there's
quarterly
a choice
would feel
between
good. Right.
never
Yeah.
and right.
I mean, if you're a senior executive in an organization, you're meeting with another organization quarterly, maybe frequently. So it's it
You're
happens
like,
all
is
day,
it
every
time
day.
for that again. Those quarterly meetings are like, oh,
But if you think
painful.
about where friction happens or failure happens, it's typically along communications and expectation across everything. So
much. Interesting.
yeah,
It's good stuff, man. I'm trying to think what else. What you guys keep talking. I'm going to look at my book.
Well,
I was gonna roll.
I need my
I was
glasses.
gonna have. I was gonna
if you
have
can see me
Brian-
on video, I'm looking.
I was gonna have
can't
Brian
see.
take us back
Oh yes.
to that undergrad degree in statistics, and how when what school did you go to?
I went to the University of Florida. My two cousins who were down at the University of Florida, 4 and 6 years older than me. At the time, Georgia did not have any kind of scholarship programs or anything like that, and wanted to get away from home. And my dad wanted me to stay east of the Mississippi and south of the Mason-Dixon line, just from a,
Classic.
Classic. My dad went to Tennessee, so I actually grew up a Tennessee Vol fan.
Oh, you happy about Friday or Saturday?
Oh yeah,
God,
and,
so was I, and I don't even like Tennessee.
yeah, and my dad passed away 3 weeks ago. So
That's right. Yeah.
So the number of
That feels like a cigar worthy right there.
yeah, if I smoked, yeah, but it was
No, I don't either. But
it was the number of people who reached out actually to
Oh,
both my
that's
mom
great.
and us, and I mean, it's my brother went to Georgia, who's 4 years younger than me, so it's not just football season; it's women's gymnastics or volleyball or baseball, softball. It's all year round in our house. My poor mom, but so yeah, I went to UF. I was pre-med and pre-actuarial science, believe it or not.
dude,
So
that was pre-med.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
good at math and
Shouldn't have been, but I was.
was and
I feel like you'd be a podiatrist or something.
Me?
Yeah.
That's hurtful.
What kind of doctor are you going to be? A surgeon?
Absolutely not.
A dermatologist? I don't know.
No, none of those things. I would have been terrible. I would have been a terrible physician.
I wanted to be a trauma surgeon.
Oh,
Yeah, I would have
calm
been.
in the midst
I
of
would have been good in
chaos.
the ER. Yeah, I'm good at those things.
That's what I love. I love solving problems, figuring out what's going on the fly, all that. Right, trying to take everything you know and what you got in front of
Right.
you and assessing it and solving it.
When I did work in surgery, Tina, I went to. Thank you very much. They
think
had
it's
me. They were like,
impressive.
"You should come watch surgeries." I was like, "Okay, cool." And I'm in there, and I was like, "This is excruciatingly boring. Like
Yeah.
it is."
It's not like it is on
painful.
TV.
Nothing like it's like, and there's like this code of like, well, you can't just walk out. Like the residents are like, you can't just leave. And I'm like, he's like, you won't be respected if you just leave. I'm like, I just leaned over. I'm like, this is freaking terrible. It's like,
You're not
sorry.
even impressed with like the organs and stuff. You're
Well,
like, whatever.
The first one I ever did, I was because they were removing this tumor that was the size of like a football, and the surgeon was great. I don't remember his name, but he was great. There's actually two surgeons involved because it was like interconnected in like the stomach area, you know. And I just remember he leans over, he looks at me, and he goes, "This is where the money's made, right here." And he goes, "I got to make this cut, and if I don't make it right, it's like this
Game
is bad.
over?
This is
Yeah.
bad, like real bad." And he's like, "This is where it's made, right here." And I was like, "Okay." And then he takes it out.
It's like a baby.
It was unbelievable. This, the
Wow.
assistant's got this like, pan thing.
Right,
It's
yes.
Like, koosh. It was like,
Yes.
oh my Lord. It was unbelievable. That was the coolest thing I ever saw. After that, it was all It was all just terrible, honestly.
I'm going to tell you something gross right now. That
No,
after I had my
that was
first
gross.
son, no,
Oh.
it's gross. It's just
Okay.
that gross.
Oh, we're going
Yeah,
there.
I'm leafing through the pictures, right, of the birth of my first child. So
Yes.
beautiful. So and it's actual like photographs, right? Because it was before digital cameras.
Yes, I understand.
Photographs. Oh,
Polaroids.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, what the hell is that? It was like the blue bin, right? The standard
Someone
issue
took a picture of it?
of the afterbirth.
Ew.
It was disgusting.
Oh.
It's
no.
like a thing you didn't know. I was like, that was inside me.
Who was
It's
your
like,
photographer
there
that
was
did that?
my ex-husband took the picture.
No,
He's like, I thought you'd want to see it.
ex-husband.
He's like, I thought you'd want to see it. And I was like, Now, interestingly, later in life, a friend of mine who is a very
Is this going to get
quirky
weird?
human.
Is this
No,
gonna get
she
weird?
was like, did you see that? What did it even look like? And I was like, I have a picture. I'll show you.
Looks like an
And I
alien.
gave it to her. It looks like
No, we don't need
an organ. It looks like an organ.
Don't need anything.
That's all. I'm just telling you.
I don't know how we got this.
So I know what you mean.
Pre-med.
Like the football
there we go.
in the bucket. I know what that.
I didn't
know
like
what
the
that looks
classes. And I didn't like the majority of the people I was taking classes with. I hated the labs. People were so like
Labs were
competitive.
hard. Organic chemistry killed me, but
Yeah.
that was.
And my grade, I think I had a B plus or B minus in it. I mean, it was, but I didn't enjoy it. And I was taking some business classes for the actual science minor, and then stumbled into becoming president of my fraternity.
Oh.
And I really enjoyed the business side of things.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another, and literally stumbled into the MHA program at Florida. I figured I'd take the take the MCAT, not the MCAT. Gee whiz. Try this again. Take to the GMAT because the business school, they'd have those posters up, and it would say the further out you go from taking it, your score drops basically. So I'm like, I'm taking this thing. If the score is valid for 2 years, I'll go find a job and go back to business school in 2 years. And then somehow literally stumbled across I can tell that story too if you want, the MBA, MHA, it's in the book.
No, I stumbled across it too. We didn't say. I mean, we have very similar paths. Like, I didn't even know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I got this health science degree. Like, what the frick do you do with this? That should be like a crime. No school should give you a degree that gives you nothing. I took more classes than nurses did, like more medical classes, but that didn't give me a nursing degree.
Yeah.
Like, I would have had to take all the nursing classes. It's so stupid. It was like, this is ridiculous. I come out, I couldn't do a thing. I couldn't do anything clinical. Nothing.
Could have been orderly.
Yeah, maybe that's. I would have been terrible at that too.
But now my son's taking this health science class in high school. If he stays in this track, he'll either get to be an EMT or a farm tech before he even graduates high school. Right? I mean, it's amazing what these.
None of that stuff was available. I took 4 years. I got nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, my niece or my goddaughter, she was majoring in pharmacology in college. And at the same time, she took a 6-week phlebotomy course and became a certified phlebotomist.
Yeah.
And that's how she paid for the rest of her 5-year pharmacology degree.
I worked at Grady Hospital in Atlanta in the summers and over Christmas break.
Oh,
and stuff.
did you? Like
yeah.
Candy striper or no?
No, I worked in the lab.
My brother did that.
I worked in the lab. I worked in the hematology lab
Nice.
and was able to do enough, things that you could do with a high school diploma. A friend of the family gave me a summer job because it was great. That it allowed the other team members to take time off, and I'd come back on to work Christmas and those kinds of things because
that's great.
Giving people the day off because
I don't think you can even do that stuff anymore without.
I know. I was wondering, can you?
You probably
are there
need like a
opportunities?
technical degree.
But it was really interesting because the teaching hospital and every summer you would get the new class of residents and I'd be teaching them what all the lab tests are. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do they not teach you this in medical school? It's just interesting.
They don't.
They
don't.
But my friends who went to medical school and are practicing now, they're well into their careers. Like they don't teach you anything about business. They don't teach you
nothing. They don't do anything on like how. It's crazy.
But
All right, so you went to Florida. You graduated. You went to MHA.
Yeah.
What did you do right out of MHA?
Got a job at Ernst & Young. And that story's in the book too. I got Ernst & Young and figured I would do consulting for a couple of years. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, she went back to Tampa in the Ernst & Young office there. 6 months after we get there, they sell the consulting practice to Capgemini, as they're getting ready to do again now, right? They're getting ready to break it apart.
I was working with those guys when that happened.
Yeah. And then next thing you know, a couple of years later, they sold us to Accenture. So I had 3 jobs, 1 company. And it ended up doing it 6.5 years and got into the revenue cycle business that way.
Just by chance.
First project, yeah.
What was your first project on? What did you do?
First project was a medical management project.
No, for RevCycle.
Was working in Rochester, New York at just interim. We were interim management doing essentially a RevCycle turnaround, and I was just an analyst. And
was your father aware you were north of the Mason-Dixon line?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I was up there for a winter.
Ooh.
Winter in Rochester, New York.
Brutal.
It's like October in Michigan.
Shush your mouth.
No, this was like sloshy, wet snow on the ground, nonstop.
Yeah, it sucks.
But the hotel had a parking garage. That was the saving grace. And when the springtime came, it was beautiful there.
Beautiful,
right? Great AAA minor league baseball stadium. But this was in 2000, and in that city at that time was basically in a depression because of Kodak and Xerox and all these major corporations that just
so nothing was happening.
No.
Oof.
It was sad.
That's rough.
But they have a great barbecue place in Rochester, New York.
Oh, okay.
Dinosaur Barbecue.
Would not have thought
I know,
that, but
Well,
I know we don't do promotional stuff on this show.
no, we
but
like it. Listen,
but if you're ever
I'm
in Rochester, New York,
Rochester, New York,
Dinosaur Barbecue.
Dinosaur Barbecue.
good name to remember.
And,
It'll stick in
you
my
know.
brain forever. Probably never go to Rochester. But
I know the people in the South where I'm from are probably like cussing me out when they hear this. How dare you say there's good barbecue in Rochester? But
So what's your barbecue sauce then, from this from the South?
I like the vinegary barbecue sauces, believe it or not.
Carolina, right? They call it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's even more vinegary than that. Just some specialty places. Yeah, but I like
Yeah.
the mustardy vinegary ones
Okay. Yeah.
is what I like. But
I do too. That's my favorite. It's my go-to.
so we have a lot in common. MHA.
You are the same.
Same person. Wait, when did you graduate high school?
When I graduated high school, 92.
That's
Just had my
that's
30 year
94, that's
just had my
94.
30-year reunion.
So you're just 2 years older than I am.
Yep.
Dude, crazy. So you got in a rev cycle, then you took a job at Piedmont at that point? No.
No, I did 6.5 years and had really long projects in revenue cycle, like multi-year kind of stuff with that interim management gig, and then did a transformational project in New York City. Was actually there on 9/11.
Whoa.
It was 100 blocks away, but I was there. And then spent a couple years helping Tenet consolidate all their business offices when they had 100 hospitals and 54 business offices.
Right.
Back when
Totally
they
forgot.
were large, much larger than they are today.
Before Conifer, pre-Conifer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And went back into consulting, and a couple years later, they offered me a job. Ironically, one of the sessions I facilitated when I was at Tenet, helping them create their new structure, was their org structure and design. And we created this job, and at the end of it, I told the senior vice president, I said, that'd be a really cool job to have one day. And a couple years later, they came to me and asked me if I would take a job. And it was a regional role where I had a half dozen hospitals, had an employee at each, and was responsible for the rev cycle results. And so it's sort of an internal consulting, and it was absolutely the perfect transitional role out of consulting because I was still doing consulting work, and I was going from traveling every week to a few times a quarter.
Right.
I mean,
Much better.
yeah, one of the hospitals I had was in Hilton Head, so I got to go to Hilton Head every month. Probably the worst decision I ever made 12 times was never touching the sand while I was there, because I was working so hard. So I would only go up once a month. I stayed on the beach every time, but never touched the sand. So I don't know what's wrong with me, but just lessons learned.
Remember Doug Lang and I would always
add an adventure to.
It didn't matter. We were like, we're here.
Doing something.
We're going. One time we went to the ocean and we were in like California, like LA area. And we were like, we're going in the ocean. We didn't have swimsuits, towels. We grabbed towels in the hotel. We bought a swimsuit. I'm like, I'm going to this freaking ocean.
Yeah.
I don't care what it takes.
I just worked too hard. It was, bad choices, bad priorities.
Well,
But
it's funny when you hear people too, like in the consulting world, and so many people we talk to, like, I've been to all these places, but you didn't get to see all those places, and because the inside of a Hyatt looks the same pretty much everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Sucks.
But so I spent a year in that role, and then they wanted me to take on a role of focusing on bad debt. Trevor Fetter, the CEO at the time, was getting a lot of questions from Wall Street around bad debt. And so one of the senior vice presidents was talking to me about this role, and it was really a project, she said. And then I said, it sounds more like a job. She reached in her bag and pulled out a job description and said, Director of Bad Debt on it.
That sounds terrible.
And I looked at her, and she's still a mentor and friend today. And her name's Norma Zerang, and Norma was awesome.
I was going to ask if you knew Norma.
Norma's awesome.
So when I was at McKinsey,
Yeah.
I got to know Norma.
Yeah. I mean, Norma taught me so much and gave me so many opportunities, as did others off that Tenet team, and Steve Mooney and Janie Patterson and Matt Michaels. And I mean, you name it. I was just so thankful for the opportunities that they gave me.
That's great.
And I said, I'm not into titles, but I don't want to be the director of bad anything, right? So we brought in the
Sounds like
rollout.
a bad omen.
Right. That's,
Yeah. We brought in the rollout, became a director of strategic initiatives, and did all kinds of cool stuff. I hired a PhD in statistics who's still at Conifer today. I hired one of my former colleagues who's ready to get out of consulting, and she's still at Conifer today. Some of the stuff that we were doing back then is still in place. It's really cool to see from a legacy perspective when you're able to make a difference.
Yeah.
And then they wanted me to create Conifer in the end of 2007. My wife was 7 months pregnant with our now 14-year-old, the one we were talking about before in the ballroom dancing story. And for family, I was 2 weeks away from moving to Dallas, but I was
probably good that you didn't do that.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Well, the reason I didn't do it was a family friend of mine who I grew up with. My parents were really close with their parents. She's my age. She had just had her third kid under 5, and her husband drops dead of a heart attack at age 39.
Oh.
Oof.
And I'm sitting there at the funeral, sitting to myself, I'm going to go to Dallas. And as good as these people are, they are very work focused. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to know anybody. And I'm going to be up to my neck in this job for years to come. I can't put my wife through that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and the one person you really want to get to know, you're not going to be able to spend time with. So,
Right. And, just
Yeah.
deprive my parents that time who lived down the street from being able to see their grandkid and, get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
So I, chose to go take a job at Piedmont, which was an incredible opportunity. They were building this program office, and the 2 previous leaders of the program office were COOs at a couple of small hospitals. I got to interview with Tim Stack, as we talked about before.
Yeah.
And
Who's just amazing.
yeah, I mean, it was just, an incredible opportunity. And it was. And I got to work with Ed for 4 years. And next thing you know, I'm running RevCycle, or it's running me. But I'm really proud of what it was able to accomplish at Piedmont. I mean, in RevCycle, you're never done. There's always a million things to do. And one of my direct reports, she'd find $1 million opportunity every week. I mean, I used to
nice.
literally every week she'd find some kind of $1 million opportunity. And we just put it in line behind the $5 million and $10 million opportunities, right?
Gosh.
You know,
It's really unbelievable. What do you think about RevCycle today? What's your thoughts? You're not in it up in the, like me, I'm out of ops anymore.
yeah.
So I don't know if I have a right to an opinion, but I feel like I'm around those people.
He has one.
I have one.
I-
I don't know if I have a right to one.
Can I take it up a level and talk about healthcare in general, and hospitals and health systems?
Sure.
It's fascinating to me from a cultural perspective, and you talk about the things that people had seen through the pandemic, right?
Right.
The nurses with all the death that they had seen, and people had not experienced it before. But when you talk to people who've left their job, it's not, at least when I talk to them, that's a impact of just having to deal with all that. But it was really the realization that, in my second book, I'm going to talk about this, that what I call the phenomenon that these organizations feel like everybody is replaceable, right? They're given a shift, and they're having so much compliance and so much regulation and so much burden put on them, whether it's teachers, nursery school, daycare people, nurses. They are living a day where they're literally having to check boxes and try to satisfy people who are customers, right? Where they really have no deviation or control to be able to modify what they're doing because they got to go to a checklist.
Where there was probably 1 or 2 instances where this happened.
Right.
That bad players.
Yeah.
That now we have a compliance
Yeah.
regulation that makes sure that doesn't happen again.
One of my good friends
so
I
true.
grew up with, who's the anesthesiologist, said the most dangerous day to be in the hospital is the day the Joint Commission shows up. He said, because everything that where it used to be can't be there. Like the crash cart can't be there because it's technically in violation of the
That's
Joint
right.
Commission. And you start thinking about it, right? And you think about all the work that health systems have to do in order to prepare for a Joint Commission or the Joint Commission. It's completely reversed of what it needs to be. The intent is absolutely in the right direction, right?
I just remember in surgery, like the fridge temperatures were like the big deal.
Yeah.
Where we kept food for patients, it had to be at a certain temperature, and it was always like, we don't have the monitors. So it would be this huge deal, seriously.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
again-
like, that's what we're worried about, like the fridge temperatures?
But
Not
it's,
keeping organs in there.
and I'm sure like you said, there's a reason for it. And I'm not trying to be disparaging, but it's like we've put so many layers of security in that we're so process focused, we've lost sight of what the outcome needs to be. And I think that's the thing with RevCycle, right? At a whole, it's just always about trying to put in these extra layers of process. And you're like, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish?
Right.
And you just put more layers in, and then the costs keep going up, and it's a constant game, as we've talked in the past with about insurance companies and those kind of things. So
Well, I think it's also like especially for RevCycle, but healthcare in general, the reason you get fired is you don't do what you're describing. You get fired because you tried something different potentially, and it didn't work. Like you get fired over that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like there's not a lot of like incentive for people to go do something different, to do it transformationally, unless they're just wired that way, because they'll get fired over it potentially.
So when you had a meeting, or the CFO at the hospital that you're working at, where you were part of surgery, you weren't running surgery, what was the unit called? Surgery? Was it a department?
Yeah,
Was it
Department of Surgery.
Was it a cost center?
It was all those things.
Yeah. I mean, to me, cost center is the most detrimental term you could ever use for people. I mean, just think about that. When you're called a cost center,
Yeah, 100%.
how do you operate? I mean, if you're running a radiology department at a large health system or a large hospital, and you have millions of dollars of fixed assets that are sitting there, and you're told you're a cost center, and you're managing the cost, and your direct variable cost of running another scan is like next to nothing, but your profit margin is absolutely the most profitable thing in the hospital, next to sleep lab probably, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And these things are that it's just, they're run backwards. And again, I'm not, trying to be critical of, it's just the nature which we're all brought up in, and decades worth of this is how it's done.
I just remember spending in surgery so much time to figure out what our actual cost was. Like if you want to do a margin on like different surgeries, trying to figure out what our actual cost actually was for that actual surgery was almost impossible. It took so much work to get there. So then you had no idea. So people would be like, well, we're losing money on these. I'm like, are we? Like, I got to figure, let's back into that number.
Right.
But we have to do that on everything.
And then you try to figure out what your reimbursement is, and that's nearly impossible too, because of all the patient portions you don't collect, or the denials, or the DRG downgrades, or the other thing that happened. So you can't even figure out what your revenue is. So you can't figure out, you talk about cost, and then you can't figure out revenue. How are you ever supposed to figure it out?
No, don't even get me started on budget.
Yeah.
Marty and I had this discussion about budget. Like, budgeting to me in the health system is so crazy, because it's like, well, I didn't use that. If I don't use that, then they'll think I can cut that because I didn't use it. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, that's the other thing that gets you fired, right? 100%. Don't go over budget.
Don't go over budget.
I remember when I took over the rev cycle at Piedmont, one of the departments had a supply cabinet, and it was literally locked down.
Yep.
And this was not in surgery, where supplies actually are expensive. This was in the office, where we were talking about pens and paper, and right. And so this is a department of 100 plus people. And the director had the key to the supply cabinet. If the manager needed a notepad, she needed to go to the director to get the key. So this manager, she's over a team of 30 people, right? Which salaries of, let's just say $30,000, $40,000 a year, right? She's managing $1 million+ budget, but she can't get a key to the supply cabinet. And so, one of the first things I did is I took all that stuff out of all their budgets. The only thing you need to focus on is labor and getting the work done. Because whether or not you're hiring people, you're using temp staff.
That's where you actually, like a health system, it's all the cost. Labor is like almost all of it.
Like the number of pens you're using and paper and stuff isn't. But here's the ironic part is our supply budget actually went down after I did that. After I opened it up and let people take whatever they want.
Because people hoarding them.
Right. Because it wasn't true. People treated it like gold.
Keeping in the ceiling tiles.
Yeah.
That happened at Borges, yeah. There were people like that were putting like supplies in the ceiling tiles of like their office. Because they didn't know when they could get them again.
Right.
It's crazy.
It is.
That's crazy.
But because it creates a scarcity mindset, right? That like, well, I don't know when it's like toilet paper in the pandemic.
I don't want to have to go ask for the key.
I don't know when I can get it again, so I'm going to get as much as I can.
Right. And you've got the director who's focusing their time on, like, you got a team of 100 people. You're responsible for thousands of phone calls coming into this for, pre-registrations, authorizations. You're worried about supplies? No, ma'am. We're going to take that out of your budget. We'll run that at the high level.
Just tell me what you need.
But it was one of those weird things. I just, and you start realizing the more you can trust people and the less you micromanage, their ability to perform just goes way up. And you invest in that mindset and that culture. We were able to drop our turnover rate by more than 50%. The last 2 years I was there, it was under 10%. I mean, that, and our employee engagement scores were the highest in the health system. And people talk about the hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue improvement, the transformation, all that. Those are the two numbers I'm most proud of, because we're really making a difference.
I think, what do you think about, I've been on this kick around benchmarks are causing a lot of the problem.
In healthcare or in revenue cycle or both?
Both.
Yeah.
But healthcare is revenue cycle especially, because I feel like what happens is like the benchmark. Well, that's the benchmark now,
Yeah.
and like, oh, okay, I got to it, or I'm at the benchmark, or like, but do we really know what that is? And isn't that like limiting performance?
I would agree with you. I mean, what you're doing is you're moving a metric. You're not moving the business.
Right, because you're just gonna go to
Yeah.
like whatever I get to. Like, I gotta get my 8
Yeah.
days to this number because someone told me it's a benchmark.
Yeah. I was at a hospital. So here's a good one, right? I was at a hospital and the organization was incentivized. This leaders at each of the like directors and above all had an incentive based off employee engagement scores. And so the little known thing about employee engagement scores though is the most engaged employees, guess what, are the ones who fill out the survey first, because they are paying attention to what's going on. So the more messages you send out about your engagement survey, guess what happens? Your scores start going down. So this hospital knew that. And so they sent out no messages. No messages on the employee engagement score. So their participation rate compared to the other hospitals was super low, but their scores were super high.
Of course.
Right? And so, they had a 50% participation rate, but a super high engagement rate. And so you're just moving a metric. Right?
Well, as you know, we can make metrics be whatever they
Right.
want to be.
Right? I mean,
Which is why I have so many issues with like all the different services, we won't say them in RevCycle, that are like benchmark focused. And I'm like, those are so hard to compare apples to apples. We'd have this same thing in surgery. We had these consultants come in and they're like, well, you're not at this. Remember, it was like HBI. It wasn't HBI. It was
Truven.
HCI Sachs, or it was like Michael Sachs' company before it was Truven.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, we need to be at the 25th percentile for cost. And I'm like, but you can't even tell what's in those numbers. Like, it's because I had all the ancillary support, like reprocess, like central sterilization and
absolutely.
Supplies. And it's like trying to compare those to other facilities is like, you've seen one hospital, I've seen one hospital.
Right. They're guides. And if you're trying to.
But it was like, you got to get to 25th percentile.
Yeah.
Like, well, we're going to cut all our people. So I don't really understand. We're going to be.
And again, there's a lot of waste out there, right? I mean,
there is, but it just was like, this is how that's all they knew how to do.
Yeah. But I have tremendous admiration for the CFOs who can do that kind of work. I mean, because cost reduction is just tough. I mean, those business transformation projects and consulting, I mean, revenue cycle is much better than business transformation because, cost cutting is tough.
Well, because it's structurally so hard. It's such a fixed cost type of environment to move the ship to a different type of model, which is what everyone's having to go through. Is you just can't do things the same way. And we also, I don't think volumes will ever be the same. Not the same type of volume. So that's changed.
Yeah.
And there's some CFOs who are like, we're gonna get back to 2019. I'm like, I don't think so.
I don't think you will. How?
I don't know how.
Nobody who's choosing to go anywhere for service is going to choose a hospital for a CT, an MRI, a lab test, rehabilitation.
I don't want to go there.
What do they call those things? IV. They've got the retail. They've got the retail IV therapy stuff that's going on. All those are really high margin services that the hospitals used to have, and they're gone. But the hard part is the emergency department is a lifeline for many communities, and it's the hospital that's just shut down in Atlanta, where I'm from.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah, I mean it's huge issues.
Wasn't it something like someone's volume is way up, like 80 or somewhere?
Everyone's up, yeah.
Just because they all had to go somewhere else.
Yeah, even hospitals further out, the Piedmont Atlanta campus, and it's going to have a huge ripple effect the whole community. But I mean that hospital wasn't sustainable when I was supporting it from a tenant perspective back when it was a tenant hospital before it was sold to Wellstar. Right, I mean, it was
tough.
And again, I'm not blaming the for-profit model, but in general, they capital starve the facilities, and to the point where that hospital probably needed $500 million of investment. It was the estimate that I'd heard.
And they were going to take as much money out as they could before they do it. Right.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's just it got to a point where it's unsustainable.
Yeah, you can't do it.
And so then you start losing docs because you don't have the right facilities and equipment, and it just becomes a downward spiral. And it's sad. But
All right, we've talked enough rev cycle healthcare.
Enough
Got
of
dark.
that. It always does.
It always does. I wanted to talk about backers, but I don't think we have time. Let's talk about what you're doing with your book. So your book is, how do people get it? Because the audiobook won't be out.
the audiobook won't be out for a while. So
Couple months.
the digital version's out. By the time this podcast is out, the hardcover will be out.
You buy that
And maybe
Amazon or-
maybe the soft cover too. The soft cover got delayed.
The soft cover
Or
gets delayed,
paperback
huh?
book, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be out in December.
Who wants a
But,
soft cover anyways?
It's all the paper shortages.
Yeah. It's cheaper to produce, much cheaper
The
than a
profit
hardcover.
the profit margins are better.
Is it better for you if they get the soft copy?
It
versus
doesn't
the
really
hard
matter at
copy?
this point.
Or the e-copy?
It's because I have a publisher and because of all the people who take cuts
Doesn't
along the
matter.
way.
Everyone takes
I'm
cuts.
gonna-
You don't make money.
I'll make my $1 on the book and move on. And I just want people to read it. I mean, so you can get it wherever books are sold. That's the cool part. You can go out to Barnes and Noble and Target and type in Everyday Leadership and my last name, Unell. And
I know
it's
you
there.
mentioned Shay in the book because I was talking to Shay after he wrote his book. I was like,
Yeah.
it's because we know the book Gambit, right?
Yes.
It is a gambit, and I'm like, how much money have you lost at the time?
Oh.
I think he's done better now.
Yeah.
because he's it's been around longer. But oh my gosh,
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll have an opportunity to do some speaking off of it.
yeah. I'll say, are you gonna speak off of this? Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean,
Are you looking for those things?
well,
I'm gonna make a plug for you.
yeah, so I'd love to do those kinds of things. I mean, I've got a full-time gig right now and moving from a CO to a CO position of a company called Vantage Health. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, which is great and great opportunity there. And but no, if there's some side opportunities to do a little bit of that here and there, if I could fit it in, it'd be great.
Cool.
But I mean, the cool part about the book is, there were a number of people who made obligatory purchases, right? Some friends and family,
Sure,
and
of course,
right?
You
And-
need those, but yes,
right. And one of them told me, he's like, I figured I bought it because I wanted to support you. He said, I picked it up. I figured I'd read 10 pages and put it down. And so he said, I picked it up and I read it. He's a retired physician. And he said, kept reading it. And he goes, I got to the end of it. He goes, I wanted to go back into practice and give this to all my front desk staff. He said, because the impact that you can make.
yeah, that's great.
So that's the kind of feedback that is just so rewarding. My uncle read it and said that he was going to use it at his, he's on the board of his condo, and he said he was approaching an
Condo
issue.
association.
Right, he was going to approach
Right.
an issue a certain way, and after he read the book, he's going to approach it a different way. And-
HOA.
yeah, and people tell me they're using it in their house from a parenting perspective and getting arguments with their significant others and spouses. So yeah, I'm causing all kinds of problems.
That's good.
So,
That's
but
great.
no, I appreciate it. It's a labor of love, and like I said, I've got more, so we'll see what happens with it.
I like more.
right.
What else,
That's
Tina?
right.
What else
There
are we
could be a
asking,
workbook.
Brian? You got nothing?
I don't know what's next. I guess there's another book. That's what's next.
Yeah.
He's gonna work his day job. And
Wait, what's the next book going to be about? Is it this, just a continuation of this, or are you writing your rev cycle book?
No, the next book is essentially it's done. Because as I mentioned, I wrote 50 chapters on 100,000 words, and this is only 18, about 30,000 words. The next book is right at 30,000 words, and it's really about taking. So the first book's about the leader themselves. The second book is really about building culture and high-performing teams. The working title is Cultivating Culture. And ironically, the word cultivate and culture, I believe it or not, have the same Latin root. Never really thought about it before. But so do hospital and hospitality, but it's a different conversation.
Yes.
But,
yes.
the ability to cultivate culture and the impact that you can have. And so it needs to be edited and it needs a little bit of work on the front and the back, but the meat of the book is done. 29,000 plus words are done.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So
you're
we
ready
can come
to
back
go.
on for the next one.
Yeah.
But
Sweet.
it'll be exciting.
All right.
one book at a time.
That's right.
But I will say, as I talked about before, I thought the hard part was the writing, but then you get into the editing and the publishing jungle that you navigate through, and then you got to think through the commercialization jungle. And I'd never commercialized anything before with my background. Fortunately, it came along at the same time as we're working at this startup that's focused on the patient billing experience, and the paths have been fantastic because it's allowed me to really use both sides of it to help each other, both sides of the business to help each other
Right.
out. So,
Right. Whole different worlds.
yeah. I mean, if you've never marketed anything before and you know nothing about marketing, which is me, it's like
I know, but
speaking a foreign language.
he's in Canva. He's making some stuff. It's exciting.
Yeah.
That's great.
He's making some stuff.
Making some stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for flying here to beautiful Detroit in
Yeah.
this lovely weather.
Thank you for having me. It's 2.5 years in the making. How much better is it now that the book's done versus me coming on 2.5 years ago talking about the thought of writing a book, which I never would have done probably.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, definitely. It's great. It's great. You always
All right.
have it.
Wherever books are sold.
Wherever books are sold, Amazon,
Go get
Barnes
one.
and Noble,
Get one now. Pre-order.
your local bookstore. I don't know if it's at your local bookstore.
And leave a review.
And leave a review.
Oh yes, leave a review.
Ben.
Oh, Ben
Oh,
Regal.
me.
Leave a
Yes,
review.
I will. For
Don't
sure.
say you know Brian. Be just a general reader.
Oh right, yeah. Yeah, of course,
You know.
of course.
You know.
Yes. I don't want to sound like a family.
My brother.
It's my brother.
All right.
Cool. All
Thanks
right,
for having
thanks,
me.
Brian.
My good friends, my good friends, my good friends. Do a little bit of everything, everything. Cause it takes a bit of everything, everything. My good friends, my good friends, my good